In a small town, where every secret is hidden behind sweet smiles and kind words, power games are slowly being revealed. A love that fills the empty spaces, tough decisions, and truths that seem impossible to change. Can love truly save, or is it just a mask hiding darker schemes? Join us as we explore the complex relationships, betrayals, and unanswered questions in a story where every choice comes at an unpredictable cost. Welcome to the world of Beyond the Gates, filled with secrets and intrigue. The anger smoldering through the town doesn't erupt with a bang, it moves underground like lava beneath dry earth. Bonds that once felt solid are hairline cracked at the thinnest edges, and when one edge gives, the whole surface starts to tremble. From Pamela's apartment with its warm amber lamps stretching shadows, to the high-rise hotel where Bill drops in as if by muscle memory, to Haley's house with thick walls holding things no one has ever named, to the closed office where Eva sits with the unwilling help of Mona and Jan, and finally back to the heavy, airless room at Naomi and Jacob's home, the entire town seems suspended between fragile ecstasy and consequences that cannot be undone. People try to smother everything under courteous smiles and soft handshakes, but underneath, every binding thread is being pulled to its limits. Danny entered Pamela's space with a shocking kind of honesty she mistook for courage, though on some deeper level she knew she was asking permission to speak about what she no longer controlled. She called up nights from memory like warm winds sweeping across a desert, where the body is satiated and the heart mistakes itself for being lifted to some higher altar. It wasn't showy carnality, but the moment the door clicks shut an expensive cologne mingles with a shattering sigh where Danny believes she and Bill climb out onto the highest span of a shaking bridge and gaze down at a fast river yet still imagine themselves safe. Sometimes, in that brief lull after the surge recedes, she feels an illusion that love is ascending and everything beyond is just noise. But as soon as that mirage dims, a naked question scratches across the glass: is this love or just a self-spell for dodging breath-stealing commitments to herself? She senses in Pamela's silence a cold mirror, as if every detail Danny describes reflects some implied verdict. She realizes she's turning her friend into a storage locker for dangerous feelings, and in that instant the only sound in her head is fear of being judged by the very friend whose goodness she relies on, even though Pamela says nothing. Danny understands that once a valve is opened the water will flood out, impossible to recall, and the lines between right and wrong, bondage and freedom, love and addiction, will no longer be tidily drawn by a few comforting declarations. Across town, Haley pulls the curtains as if tugging the cord that partitions her house from the world. She believes control is the only refuge from chaos, but control, over time, becomes a set of rules tightening around the throat of the man she calls husband. He begins to gasp in a silence with no expiry date, and the house turns into a restricted zone where every smile is frozen, every sentence cut off, every need deferred past endurance. Haley doesn't see herself as one who harms. She thinks this is the path to safety, a way to keep variables from cracking the wall she labored to raise. Yet even as she repeats that to herself, a quiet part of her recognizes each new rule is another stone pressed to the man's chest. His endurance never explodes into shouting, it drains out into a chain of colorless days. There, the way she squares the dinner plates, the way she folds towels by pallet in the bathroom, the way she checks his sleep with a cold, watchful eye laced with suspicion and judgment, these teach him to withdraw into a shell of muteness. When Haley finally sees it, the moment for a restorative hug has already passed. His body has learned to shrink from touch, like a creature caged so long it fears even the hand that would free it. While two homes exhale on staggered breaths, Eva sits at her desk and stares at two names written in a small notebook. Mona and Jan are neither confidants nor kin, they are two mismatched pieces she has dragged onto the same board. Mona hears tones between lines people try to hide, an intuition part nature, part scar tissue. Jan is the opposite, dry, dissecting, a knife aiming straight for data. Eva sets before them an unfinished picture, invoices with artfully altered dates, a side contract with coy signatures, a drizzle of small transfers through intermediary accounts like unnoticed drizzle. She will not let the town's noisy ears eavesdrop, because any leak will be kneaded into something half mocking, half malicious, then quickly forgotten. Eva needs conclusions, not rumors. She needs a truth she can grasp when the big wave hits. In this moment her plea for help isn't surrender, it's a vow to tug the loose thread at the carpet's fringe until the rug peels off the floor, forcing everything hidden to face the cold light of day. Naomi and Jacob sit across from each other. The space between them isn't too far to touch hands, yet far enough for an invisible draft to move through, carrying dust from old compromises. They pick a night without noise. The traffic outside feels like a shrill underscoring. In the past, they were sure things could be fixed by postponing, with a reluctant nod, with a promise to talk tomorrow. But tomorrow never arrives on time, and the familiar questions return to cram the cramped quiet. Naomi speaks of being weighed between family responsibility and private dreams, between nameless obligations and a wordless urge to smash a wall. Jacob speaks of ledgers, funds, decisions that look rational but drag hard-to-price consequences behind them, of the boardroom stares and the endless demands of results. They look at each other with the same tired eyes, both wondering if love is being converted, silently, into an asset to be preserved or a debt to be serviced with painful concessions. When their talk should be steering them to an answer, it fans more forks in the road. The future looks like a corridor lined with 100 ajar doors, behind each waits a possibility both promising and threatening, and no sign to guide them, only short, uneven breaths and heartbeats out of sync. These stories do not stand alone, they weave through one another with countless thin cords. As Dani imagines herself sealed within a safe zone apart from the rest, cords from Eva, Naomi, Jacob, and Haley begin to ton the net, turning every secret into a tangled mesh. Dani wants to believe there is something sacred between her and Bill, but at that same moment, Haley tightens her household until her husband can no longer tell whether love is care or punishment. Bill keeps striding down carpeted hotel corridors, slipping out of long meetings and quiet handshakes, carrying the certainty that desire makes people blind. In this world, every blink from Dani is both a choice and a piece of evidence, and each step she takes toward Bill closes another door behind her. The question isn't whether she loves, it's whether she is freely surrendering her power to choose to a man who knows too well how people run. Somewhere a crueler question waits for her answer. When pleasure drains away, does what remains look like the skeleton of dependency or the foundation of growth? Haley stares into the bedroom wardrobe mirror and sees a face she can't recognize. She used to think discipline would salvage love, that standards breed safety. But what happens when standards become an invisible whip on the back of her partner's patience? When he starts leaving earlier and coming home later, when the work schedule becomes a shield, when the phone is no longer placed face up on the table but turned down as a reflex, Haley senses that her unease is no longer a premonition, it is rooted into fact. She cross-examines herself not with words but with frenzied small rituals, counting, matching, remembering lock times, tracking meaningless numbers. At the extreme edge of control, she no longer sees a weary husband, she sees an object to be kept within a template, and when that template cracks, she will plaster it with anything within reach, even cold indifference. His endurance is exchanged for her false sense of triumph, and for another hazard, her own looming isolation. Eva spreads a city map and marks the locations that recur in those altered invoices. 2 corners only blocks apart suddenly trace a shared path through a small coffee shop nobody notices. She recognizes a pattern most miss because it is too fine, card swipes at off hours, odd short trips, parcels too light to arouse suspicion but regular enough to form a line. She sends Mona scanned, smudged fingerprints from envelopes and hands jam the chain of transaction IDs. She doesn't need the mastermind yet, she just needs one more layer peeled back, then another. But the deeper she peels the colder she feels at the back of her neck, because each layer doesn't draw her closer to anyone, it pushes her from everyone. Questions hit in waves, is she going too far, or is this merely the beginning? Are the loyal colleagues building a stage for a sweeping leg? Will these fragile clues lead to a name so unexpected that everything changes hue? Naomi and Jacob sit before a thin folder heavy as lead. Inside are more than figures, there are scratches on trust. Naomi wants the price of keeping waters calm, Jacob wants the price of summoning a storm. They try prioritizing, replacing emotion with a scorecard. Each option is graded by 2 metrics. Preserve family, preserve career. The exercise shatters instantly when they realize the columns rarely agree. When one climbs, the other plummets. Naomi understands there is no path without sacrifice, and the cruelest sacrifice is trading invisibles like respect and safety. Jacob sees his reflection in the window glass, a man who wants to be trusted but is haunted by the habit of hiding risks under the claim of protecting others. When did protection become concealment? When did love turn into surveillance? They don't say it aloud, but both wonder whether there's a way back to the starting place where things were simple. And if not, can they erect a new starting line atop the rubble of old vows? Dani leaves Pamela's apartment with a galloping heart. She knows what she confessed is beyond recall, not because Pamela will tell, but because Danny herself can no longer pretend she doesn't know. Bodily satisfaction had been a fragrant excuse laid over a formless blank within. She fears nights alone more than busy days, because night brings silence, and silence resists deceit. She itemizes the moments she called transcendence, and the list grows empty, a catalogue of self-soothing justifications. Bill isn't a nameless storm, he is a pressure system made of equations of force and direction. Each footfall he leaves carries an invisible barometric drop bending other people's orbits. The question is no longer whether Danny loves him, but whether she is volunteering her choosing power to a man who reads human currents too well. Somewhere a more ruthless question waits. When the thrill recedes, will she stand on the frame of dependence or on the footing of a harder self? Haley has reached the lowest rung of a repeating cycle. She recognizes herself in women who wandered into the maze of control without noticing. They too believed that if they performed better, neater, stricter, their partners would be happier. They failed to ask the only crucial question. Whose happiness, and does it fit the other person's breath? Her husband has begun to leave home with small pretexts, long work dinners, offhand comments he himself can't remember. The house has no laughter now, the only sound is the dishwasher, humming like a tired ballad. Haley knows her anger cannot find an exit, it claws back at her, sleeplessness following, skin cracked from overwashing, lists of tasks becoming cigarettes for the nerves. But lists no longer function, fear has turned sentient. She tells herself she needs change, but which change, when, and at what price, questions no one can answer for her. If his endurance suddenly hardens into a decision to go, can she survive a full collapse? Eva meets Mona and Jan in a room unlike the perfumed leather spaces she usually travels through. This room is raw, the table is unvarnished wood, fluorescent lights buzz as if complaining. Mona lays down a page of slanted handwriting and compares it to the signature on the side contract. Jan opens a laptop and lets transaction chains unfurl like DNA spooling out crimes. Eva fits pieces together, slowly. A name that once looked harmless rises like a live coal in cold ash. All paths seem to converge on a single source, but she refuses to leap. She wants one more corroboration, a third-party stamp, an unarguable link. Meanwhile time doesn't wait, and those who want her to fail have started whispering about her excess, about how she is disturbing order in pursuit of a phantom justice. Eva knows every unmasking exacts a toll, and the only question is the currency, reputation, relationships, or both. As the door shuts, she understands there is no return. If she stops, everything becomes farce. If she advances, a storm may sweep away the chair beneath her. Naomi returns to the bedroom without glancing at the mirror. She has long feared the glass will reflect a self she cannot accept. Jacob sits in the living room, head in hands, trying to gather stray numbers into a persuasive whole. Both know the boil point is near. Some choices won't wait past tonight: keep quiet about a small wrong to protect a larger interest, or tear out the root and live with loss that has a face. Naomi remembers telling herself that truth liberates. But truth has a brutal face too. It can shove people into a cold vacancy once illusions have been peeled off the skin. Jacob wonders where he will stand if a wall goes down, who will steady him, or whether everyone will step back to avoid the fallout. They both understand that the line between ethics and expedience has never been straight or clear. The rock-heavy question stands. Can they trust each other enough to pass through the narrowest gap without throwing the other off the cliff? Danny sits alone in a hotel room while the city light leans through glass. She tells herself all of this is a prolonged tremor and the balance will return. But what balance can there be when she herself has shifted the center of gravity? She flips through possibilities like cards. One says avoidance, another finality, a third advocate's confession. Each turns into a chain of consequences beyond her grip. She realizes she's played a supporting role in her own life for too long, letting others pick the route, Bill among them. She wonders if, tomorrow, she makes a different wager, one unfavorable to Bill, whether she'll be brave enough to hold the line when his face appears at her door. She thinks of Pamela's gaze, neither condemning nor colluding, and understands her confession is a new mirror showing the person she could be if she stops hiding behind mirage. Haley leafs through old photos, hunting proof that there was a time she didn't suspect and didn't suffocate. She recalls a husband who held her when rain hit out of nowhere, simple dinners without counting, afternoons she loosened the schedule and let the day drift. But memory is cruel too. It lays bare the gap between then and now and turns the present into a corridor of mirrors. Haley knows that if she wants real change, she cannot tidy around the edges. She must hit the core of fear, of being hurt, of being left, of losing control. No one can promise she won't bleed, no one can sign perfect guarantees in her stead. She dimly accepts that she needs to speak, not to demand, but to free herself from a rusted suit of armor. Eva comes home late, holding a preliminary report. Every arrow points the same way. There is no doubt now, only timing. She can fire the flare now and watch the corridors shudder, or wait a day to add one more linking proof. She chooses what she does best: no haste, no flailing, no retreat. She schedules a meeting with the keeper of a hidden data vault who can confirm a sequence of system logins that coincide with the suspect transactions. When that piece clicks in, every wall of pretense will fall. And then she will be a target. The question isn't only who masterminded this, but who will stand with her when the dust settles. Will Mona and Jan stay loyal to truth, or harbor calculations, ready to pivot the instant the wind turns? Naomi and Jacob write a short list of new covenants, no poetry, just bold lines to beat back ambiguity. No hiding financial risk. No using love as license to cross principles. No letting fear decide in place of values. No allowing silence to become the only language. The list isn't a charm, it's a marker driven into the sand. They aren't sure they can keep it, but without a new beginning every road loops back to the same rut. They look into each other's eyes, not to secure unanimous consent but to remember there's an actual person standing there, not a concept, not an actor in a self-directed play. They still have no answers to the biggest questions, but at least they're willing to take responsibility for continuing to ask rather than dodging. In a weak moment, Danny wants to text Bill something vague, then stops. She recognizes another loop. Whenever she feels empty she runs to him to be filled, and the filling drains quickly, leaving a larger hollow. She no longer believes in the myth of unconditional transcendence. She wants something less romantic and more real, a sober decision. She opens her calendar and strikes out evenings once reserved for shadowed rendezvous. The first sensation is lightness, as though dropping a bag she didn't know she'd carried for so long. But the lightness barely lasts, dread creeps in. How will Bill react when a familiar puzzle piece goes missing? Will she be strong enough not to slide back into place? Haley sits at the table and opens a notebook. She writes what she has never dared admit. She has harmed her husband with a fear named safety. She doesn't want exoneration, to blame the past, or to justify with old wounds. She wants to take responsibility for the present. She proposes a change, not imposed, but invited. If he accepts, they can redraw the borders. If he refuses, she will learn to move through loss without turning it into an excuse to torture herself or anyone else. For the first time in months, she closes her eyes without trying to predict tomorrow. She knows she might fail, but this failure will be hers, chosen and owned, not a failure fogged by bullet point lists. Eva's confirmation arrives at first light. The pieces locked together with clinical chill. She shivers, not from fear but from the quickening before an irreversible moment. When she sends the report to 2 key addresses, she also closes a door behind herself. From that second, the board will shift, familiar faces will be lit from a new angle, relationships will resort themselves. She knows she has chosen a place few want to stand, but it is the only way to breathe fully. One last spark of doubt flickers: who falls first, the mastermind or the messenger? Naomi and Jacob wake to a morning with few clouds. No miracle descends in the night, but the air feels different, as if a window cracked open. Dozens of questions remain, and by noon they may slump into old arguments and old stalls. Even so, a small change is present. They no longer treat the other as an obstacle on a personal path but as a fellow traveler at a distance worth respecting. Contracts still need signing, meetings attending, cash flows controlling, none of that evaporates. But if their honor isn't traded out for fear, perhaps they'll travel farther than they ever thought. The town doesn't yet sense the microshifts unfolding in 4 homes, 4 rooms, 4 hearts. Such changes cannot stay hidden for long. A single call from Eva's office could rattle power corridors. A single unexpected gesture from Haley could make her husband weep or freeze him into turning away. A single silent move from Danny could prick Bill's pride and trigger a chain reaction in places Danny cannot imagine. One new decision from Naomi and Jacob could tip the scale in a deal that looked predetermined. Everything still hangs in the air. Who will be first to shove the pendulum toward the side no one wants? Who will be brave enough to stand still and let it arc past without grabbing it back? Who will pay the highest price for a night of pleasure misnamed as love? Who will prove pleasure does not equal freedom? Who will choose truth even when it scalds? Who will run and leave the town to hunt? Each question turns into an invisible footfall, quickening toward those who think they still have time. Amid all this motion, there is one thing that needs no immediate answer. Each person has placed a small stone on the ground to mark their coordinates. Danny's stone is called facing herself, Haley's is called loosening, Eva's is exposure, Naomi and Jacob's is reset. The stones are small and might be kicked by sudden rain, yet they exist and they have weight. As the earth keeps shaking from secrets being split open, these stones will decide who stands, who slips, who is carried by the current, and who watches the river pass without regret. And as dawn bleeds brighter, no one knows whether the day will blur the fault lines or etch them deeper. They only know that surfaces that look smooth from a distance are quivering with micromotions that could become the largest fractures, should any hand, careless or deliberate, press at exactly the wrong spot.